Oh, hi. I didn't see you there. Welcome to this little compilation thing. I guess this is a new tradition for the channel. I did this last year and I'm planning on doing it. Well, not planning, I am doing it this year as well. All of December, there's not really going to be new videos. All the videos I've done that are kind of related to one another in a series are going to be compiled into compilations and then kind of re-released over the course of December. So if you missed any, here's a chance to catch up and kind of just see everything back to back to back. All of my DC stuff, like with Batman and Superman, will be in one big video. All the videos to do with Doctor Who, like in this video that you're watching, will all just be in one succinct place with like the beginnings and outros kind of chopped off to make it more coherent or at least more fluid from one to the other. I mainly do this obviously just so I could not work too hard on getting stuff out in December. Still doing streams and stuff, kind of. Discord linked below for details on that, but just giving me the month of December off to spend time with friends and family, stuff like that. I'm so incredibly appreciated of every single person who's ever tuned into my videos. The 3 million views I've gotten over the course of these 2 years. The 18,000 something of you people who have subscribed to the channel. The multitude of members and patrons who support the channel monetarily. From the bottom of my heart, thank you very much. 2025 was a great year, right alongside 2024 when everything kind of took off to begin with. I've said this kind of before in other places, and there's going to be a channel update video separately if you want further details, but there will be less videos in 2026, down to like maybe once a month rather than every single week, just for the sake of my sanity and getting out better videos instead of rushing to get one done every single week. But with all that being said, thank you once again. I probably look like death. I've been up for about 40 hours at this point. Enjoy this compilation of Doctor Who videos. Stay cool, have fun, be awesome, and I'll see you next time.
Hello. I'm the Doctor.
Franchises hailing from the small island of the UK that have taken their place in hearts and minds of many nerds for decades on end. Warhammer 40k, the grim darkness of the far future, and Doctor Who, which covers all of space and time but conveniently spends most of its plot dealing in 20th century London. And it's my job to haphazardly jam these convoluted sci-fi series into one another and see just what would happen. Welcome, all you beautiful ladies and animals, to another episode of Let's Throw Some Random Crap at 40k and see what happens. As always, if you like this video and want even more, subscribe to the channel and give the video a like, but without further ado, let's just get right into it. Let's make sure everyone's on the same page. Warhammer 40k and Doctor Who are both iconic UK sci-fi giants, but they sit at very different tables. One's a gothic bloodbath where hope is heresy, and the other is a time-traveling drama about a space wizard with a screwdriver and deep abandonment issues. So let's break down the basics, because if you don't know your Cyberman from your tech priest, you're gonna get whiplash really fast with the litany of vocabulary items in this video. Warhammer 40k is a tabletop board game with a lot of books and games all surrounding it to make you excited about spending thousands of dollars on plastic crack. Beginning in the 80s, most of it centers around the idea of grimdark, where the worst thing you can imagine happens in the worst way possible. Everything sucks, everybody's constantly fighting, and it's literally impossible to win. Hoorah! Most of its stories take the rule of cool and just run with that, often opting for the most extreme outcome rather than the most rational or even plausible. And that's what makes it fun. Doctor Who, on the other hand, is much more traditionally contrived, a sci-fi series that began in the 60s, dropped off around the 70s, and came back in the noughties for a sequel show that's done surprisingly well, blending goofy sci-fi hijinks with a dash of horror-light concepts and time travel nonsense that is more built around
convenience than honoring rules. But when done well, it scratches that cosmic itch just right and offers a lot of interesting concepts. Now, for our matchups today, I'll be throwing some of Doctor Who's most recognizable aliens, not the most powerful per se, but the most famous, into Warhammer 40k, because where Doctor Who is made up of a timeline constantly in flux and really changes the status quo of the universe, or even dimensions between writers, seasons, and the many faces of the Doctor, 40k, while still wacky, is on a much more defined timeline. We know what happens, and it doesn't shift around too much. Or well, I don't have to do as much homework to make sure that it all lines up. Trying to make sense of Doctor Who's continuity is like trying to alphabetize a black hole. Time is less of a straight line and more of a spaghetti fight in a mirror factory. Characters die, undie, loop back, regenerate, and sometimes just stop existing because the plot needed a break. So when we talk about factions or enemies, we're pulling from across decades of TV, retcons, Big Finish audio dramas, and fever dreams. So most of the time you just sort of gotta roll with it. I'm going to be aiming for the peak of each of these alien empires, but know that their history with the show is constantly in flux. And while not a Whovian expert, I do know there are some inherently more powerful creatures within the Doctor Who universe, but like I said, we're aiming for the more recognizable aliens, rather than just straight out most powerful. And also, like, I'm not taking this very seriously. We're talking about campy aliens from a British TV drama with whiskers for laser guns in a board game where toy soldiers have books written about them just to make sure they sell well. To be fair, it's working. But I just say that to say it's all fandom, random bullshit, and it isn't something I'm taking necessarily super seriously. I'm not big on the hardcore power scale conversations out there on the internet. It's just fun to think about some of these matchups and how wacky these universes would be if they happen to intersect. All this should go without saying, but prepare for lore, which includes spoilers for the show of Doctor Who, and some of the lore from 40k.
One small step for man.
Let's kick off the Rogues Gallery with the Silence. Creepy, faceless men in suits that you instantly forget the moment you stop looking at them. They're like the Men in Black, if the Men in Black were gaslighting reality itself. These guys didn't just influence history, they were history, and no one remembers. So how would a psychic race that thrives on oblivion fare in a universe where demons, psychers, and inquisitors fight for control of the human soul? It honestly depends on who or what they're going against. See, the Silence work by erasing your memory of them as soon as your eyes are off of them. But this only works on living beings that have a memory to be deja vu'd. Humans, even Astartes, could not remember a Silence if they lose track of them, but something like Necrons, machines of war without mortal minds, or even some of the Mechanicus, the Ironkin of the Votan, these would all be hard counters against the Silence's main gimmick. It's hard to erase the mind of a camera, instead things like Necrons would just remember what they're looking at. Even some humans in Doctor Who could remember the Silence with ocular implants, so even then, regular humans and space marines with augmented eyes may be able to remember them too. It all depends on how good their memory is stored in regards to their associated cyber eyes. Now, the less important factor to consider is that the Doctor in Doctor Who is a pacifist, quote unquote. And for the most part, so are his allies. So when facing the Silence, he has to do something clever, like subconsciously forcing all of humanity to clear out the Silence by hiding them in footage of Apollo 11. For basically anyone in 40k, the regular strategy is shoot first, ask maybe later. These men of grey that scream like demons and shoot lightning, yeah, they're just getting a bolter to the face. They won't have a chance for the Astartes to lose sight of them to begin with. Now, a Silence could make a very interesting character within 40k, working alongside diplomats and handling things for the Imperium as they do the Papal mainframe, a giant space megachurch in Doctor Who, but as a force attempting to build themselves up, their nature of forgetfulness is kind of just made lame by the amount of raw tech and straightforward battle tactics of 40k's armies. That being said, they'd likely do the best against orcs, too stupid to understand or unravel the plots of the Silence. In the same way they had guided humanity in the universe of Doctor Who, a whole orcish war with a shadow government of aliens you can't remember leading the charge from behind a curtain, that would be a spell for disaster. Not changing the status quo, but an interesting addition that would shake up the universe on the small scale. Whether or not they would be wholesale obliterated, I'll leave that up to you. A lot of these I'm not going to go into the full, who wins, Doctor Who or Warhammer. Just sort of opening the door and introducing some cool concepts. And then if you want to take it further in the comments, leave it down below. I read the comments all the time and I love seeing people's own speculations on this very thing. But with that out of the way, let's keep going.
When they are seen by any other living creature, they freeze into rock. No choice, it's a fact of their biology.
Weeping Angels, the horror movie villain that made us all scared of public statues. These quantum-locked nightmares can't move while you're looking, but blink and they'll send you back in time to die slowly. They feed off time energy like it's soul juice. In 40k terms, they're like Catan that specialize in psychological warfare and turning entire cities into their playgrounds. Basically, a perfect fit for a galaxy where looking the wrong way can already get you killed. Now, like the Silence, the Angels are not exactly going to be making any galaxy-changing moves, but a pack of them could survive, if not thrive, in a hive city for eons, as they hunt by sending people back in time and feeding on the energy generated by the life you're now missing out on. With trillions of batteries to choose from on a single planet, they'd be totally set, and likely, the rest of the Imperium would know none the wiser. If anything, they may end up acting as a sort of pest control, like spiders keeping the roach population down. Can't start a chaos cult if all your members get thrown wildly back in time. Or a pack of gene stealers when your leaders are getting shoved into a time closet. Never able to carry out their plans, not only would the Angels go unnoticed, they may actually be good for Imperial hive cities. For smaller, more intimate communities, they would become a more pressing threat, chewing through entire starships because while quantum locked or being observed, they are impervious to damage up to the core of a star. Unless you delete them from existence entirely or just wait a few thousand years for them to starve to death, they're not going anywhere. Or like when they were first introduced, you trick them into looking at one another and locking themselves in place, as the quantum states are involuntary on the side of the Angels. For many factions, abandoning the Angels on some backwater planet or moon, or quarantining it for a few thousand years, effectively ignoring the problem until it goes away, would be the most convenient option. But in a place like hive cities, which are covered in temples, which are then also covered in statues, a small army of weeping angels in a hive city would thrive. No way to be defeated, and no one within the Imperium is gonna blink at a few hundred factory workers who disappear out of the blue. Human lives are expendable in the Imperium, and the Angels' food, it just sort of becomes a rounding error. The Cybermen are what happens when transhumanism gets a little too excited. Strip away your emotions, replace your squishy bits with metal, and boom, you're in the club. They're relentless, adaptable, and they want you to be like them. Sound familiar? And depending on the version, they can range from slightly annoying to unstoppable planetary extinction event. From basic Cybermen that are taken out by humanity on a 2012 Earth, to a race of supremacy Cybermen who engineer an aromatic virus that converts all humans into Cybermen just by coming into contact with it, using Time Lord technology to dominate entire universes. Yes, versus plural. Think Nurgle's plagues that turn people into goo, but instead it transforms an entire hive world into an army of fortified, unthinking men of iron within a matter of hours. An invasion more efficient than the Tyranids. While an individual Cyberman might be right around, if not weaker, than the standard Necron warrior, but if you can recruit trillions at a time from any human hive city, the number advantage starts to lean in their favor. Not to mention what the Cybermen could do with Imperial or even Necron tech, upgrading their tech virus to override and upgrade entire worlds at the drop of a hat, turning entire hive cities into legions of super soldiers akin to the Men of Iron, and it's not just humanity at stake, As all humanoids in the galaxy, the Eldar and the Votan and the Tau would be threatened at the same level. Tyranids would be stopped at a halt as the Cybermen, made of metal, don't offer enough biomass for the effort it would take to harvest what little may lie in the suit from them. The only 40k factions that could challenge the supreme Cybermen are Necrons, who may be talented enough to fight back and reprogram the Cybermen for their own purposes, or Chaos, turning the Cybermen's growing powers to transform them into a massive legion of savage machine spirits paired with demonkind. But by the time they're successful, the Cybermen would have upgraded the entire Milky Way galaxy and would have been moving on to galaxies outside of it. The only way you could battle their technoplague would be to stall it, like the Tyranids, Necrons, and Men of Iron all wrapped into one horrible army, sweeping through the galaxy. Hell, even in the Doctor Who comic where the Supreme Cybermen originated from, the solution to stopping their threat was pulling some convoluted Time Lord magic out of nowhere to literally reset the entire universe. Something that no factions in 40k could pull off.
Declared war upon the Cybermen.
This is not war, this is pest control!
The Daleks are crown jewels of Doctor Who villainy. Xenophobic tanks with plungers, somehow both ridiculous and absolutely terrifying, created for one purpose: genocide. They turned an entire time war into a reality-shattering apocalypse. Imagine Necrons if they had a baby with the Black Templars. Nothing but hate in their hearts and immense technology at their feet. Wheels. Whatever they roll around on. Now, again, like the Cybermen, the Daleks can range wildly in power depending on when you catch them. Some can be gunned down with traditional gunfire. Others scoff at the sight of nuclear bombs. Those that fought in the Time War against Gallifrey, a Dalek army numbering into a billion strong, were more along the nuclear defiance kind. And the Time War Dalek Empire is what we're throwing into 40k. Atomizing weapons and a bomb so strong it would annihilate reality, if not multiple realities, if misused. Take the Necron Celestial Array, the Sun Killer, and scale it up a few hundred times, if not a few thousand times. These are the Daleks, who destroy entire galaxies just to use it like a battery. Daleks, whose own war in heaven needed to be frozen, literally a slice of time separated and put to the side so that it didn't destroy all of reality. It didn't take one doctor doing some contrived sci-fi wackiness, but 13 separate doctors basically having to step in and mutually bring an end to both sides of the Time War's conflict. Compared to the Necrons' war in heaven, which was able to conclude, and reality just sort of kept on chugging. Now, the greatest difference from Gallifrey to 40k is that the Time Lords were essentially a race of congressmen. They were always high on their own farts and lethargic when it came to responding to a real threat, so overconfident in their superiority. The Daleks were not so much more technologically superior to the Time Lords, more so they were good enough and bloodthirsty enough that the lax style of governance over Gallifrey led to the Time Lords being thrown off balance. Against a species more primed for war, the Imperium of Man or the Necrons, the Daleks would be facing a different opponent. They'd be facing armies that have a thirst for blood all the same. But even still, their immense multi-galactic scale of tech would see them outscaling the 40k armies that are just localized in the Milky Way. But there's one crucial weakness in their armor and hatred. In their fleshy core of the shells. See, Daleks are not machines like the Cybermen. They are not automatons. They are living, breathing cyborgs. Their contempt and rage is real and tangible. Not only do they outscale most of the armies of 40k from a pure technological level, being on par if not above the Dark Age of technology and the Necron Empire at their peaks, but they're alive. And with the everlasting hatred and fury the Daleks hold in their hearts, their arrival in the far future is like a massive blood-soaked lighthouse for Khorne. Of those billions upon billions, the Daleks, for better or worse, would find themselves going down the rabbit hole of Khornate worship. Then the real question becomes, does that make them more dominant in the 40k universe? Or do they begin to turn on one another and cannibalize the Empire from the inside out, like the Great Horus Heresy, which saw humanity falling so far into the depths of depravity? The Daleks may be condemned to the same fate, but on a level far greater. Not a million Astartes turned to chaos, but a countless billions of Daleks waging civil war across the Milky Way, exterminating everything in their path, if not erasing reality alongside it as well. Talk about a spicy pepper shaker.
Dear God, 3 of them. All my worst nightmares at once.
But finally, let's talk about the home team. The Time Lords of Gallifrey are the kind of arrogant ancient civilization that would look down on the Emperor for being too reckless. With their mastery over time, reality, and smug superiority, they're also the type to sit out a multiversal war just to prove a point. But when pushed, they can deploy weapons that make Exterminatus look like a warning shot. For a brief rundown, the Time Lords are some of the oldest beings in the universe of Doctor Who, technologically superior to the point that the laws of reality were written and controlled by them and them alone. They seeded many a civilization and at their peak would make the Emperor of Mankind look like a first-year student at university. They were literally untouchable, able to go back in time or forward in time and control reality in a way that no one else could. The Imperium of Man could barely take a single galaxy during the years of the Great Crusade and eventually collapsed under its own weight, while the Time Lords colonized most of the observable universe. With a lot of sci-fi factions, we end up seeing a loser in regards to Warhammer because, like 40k, so many stories focus on a single galaxy, a single army. The Time Lords, however, are no galactic empire, but rather a universal one that could dictate the laws of reality and beyond from Gallifrey. The only reason their dominant hold on the universe was threatened was because the Daleks had become such a powerful thorn in their side, both of whom could use time travel, of which the Time Lords would be overconfident in their victory before their enemies began to put the pressure on. Now, their stalemate with the Daleks wasn't forced by the Doctor because one side or the other would have won, but because reality would have lost. We've briefly sped past it when talking about Daleks, but the Time War, the war in heaven of Doctor Who, was leagues away from the powers used in the Necrons' heavenly war. Not that Warhammer's war in heaven wasn't grandiose, with machines that ate stars and weapons that fired upon the bounds of reality itself, but the Time Wars, the multiple wars in heaven, waged between the Time Lords and the Daleks in past and future, the rest of reality was threatened and was also caught in the balance. A few Time Lords even wanted to sacrifice the universe so they could live on and instead found themselves, in the rest of the Time War, trapped within a slice of reality removed from the timeline itself. It's complex, I know, but if I were to go over the entire Time War, we'd be here for a 12-hour video. But all that to say that no matter how weak a Time Lord may be in their 13 lives of a few thousand years each, no creature in 40k could touch them or their time-traveling TARDIS machines. Even if they could attempt to pose a threat to Gallifrey, the Time Lords could write them out of reality before they even existed. The only way to fight the Time Lords in any effective manner is to use time travel yourself, or just delete reality, which none of the factions in 40k really seem to be capable of. The Necrons come close, and while on the scale of 40k their time travel and space fuckery is impressive, compared to Gallifrey, who writes the laws of physics, it's again like a 6th grader trying to explain gravity to a supercomputer. Ironic, because the supercomputers in 40k's case are the 6th grader in this scenario. Even Chaos, with technology unlike nothing else, there's no telling how advanced the Pylon network, which had shut off the Chaos tap for millenniums, could be in the hands of the Time Lords. If Necrons could cancel out the warp, the Time Lords would most certainly be able to do the same, as long as they were able to get it done fast enough, although fast doesn't really mean anything to time travelers. Hell, it may even be deemed that Chaos is too bad to exist and the Time Lords would just move to a different universe and leave this chaos-infested one behind to die out. The only problem that could be posed to the Time Lords is their own existence being turned on itself. If Necrons somehow got their hands on Gallifreyan tech and started a war in heaven worse than their own or even the Daleks' war, or if Chaos could find a rogue Time Lord like the Master or the Doctor and corrupt them into being an absolute force of destruction and blasphemy with the laws of reality at their fingertips, but otherwise, the Time Lords would be able to control and abide in the Warhammer 40k universe just as they had in their own for eons up until the Time War. Now yes, could a single Astartes gun down a Time Lord? Yeah, easily. The problem is not that the Time Lords are untouchable, but it's how they wage war. Their wars are not fought on the battlefield where they stand shoulder to shoulder with guns in hand, but their wars are fought over the entire universe where they play and abuse the laws of reality to work exactly into their favor. You could shoot a Time Lord, but you'd have to find exactly where, when, and how against an enemy that can control the very physics you're using to construct the weapon you want to use against them. You could probably call it cheating, but when you write the rules, is it even possible to cheat?
If you value your continued existence, if you have any plans about seeing tomorrow, there's one thing you never ever put in a trap.
And what would that be, sir?
And finally, the wild card, the Doctor, a rogue Time Lord, a cosmic hobo, a chaos agent with a PhD in cleverness and many contrived moral gray areas. Equal parts Messiah and madman, the Doctor always finds a way, no matter the odds. In the 40k universe, they're less of a hero and more of a cataclysm with a conscience. Now, the Doctor is an enigma all unto themselves. Coming in a splattering of 15 faces or so, the specific one you're talking about is going to make a bit of a difference, although a few things remain constant across all of the variations. The Doctor loves to learn and explore and see the galaxy, but also cares about life, human life, seemingly more. He's a pacifist in that he won't stab or shoot you, but if you just so happen to be non-living or find yourself standing under a piano comedically strung up over the sidewalk, he won't pull back from letting it fall, or just getting someone else to shoot you instead. Now, with the TARDIS, catching the Doctor in a corner is next to impossible. He has to basically choose how to engage you in any conflict. And you can't just nuke his phone box because, well, we've seen it take multiversal explosions and just sort of not care. Of course, the pen is the worst enemy of the Doctor. They only really lose when the script says that they have to. But for the most part, the Doctor follows the same logic of warfare that the Time Lords do. They're just on their own set of rules beyond that. The Doctor doesn't have to square up and duke it out with you. If they really wanted to, they could go back in time and make it you never existed. The Doctor is the one who deployed the moment, a bomb so complex it developed consciousness as a side effect to judge you before you used it. A weapon that was also going to destroy both sides of the Time War until he decided to freeze it instead. If he wanted to, the Doctor could force Big E to take a phone call with himself on the throne and stop the Horus Heresy. Rules of logic and reality just don't apply when you have the powers of convenience and plot armor. Again, like with the Time Lords as a whole, you could just gun down the Doctor. They can be killed. Although, 11 did destroy a Dalek mothership just from regenerating, so even if you do shoot them, there's no guarantee you won't be evaporated in the next instant, letting the Doctor escape right after they regenerate. But this isn't a foe you need to beat in a duel. This is a person, a criminal, a hero, a wizard of proportions untold, who always has the author on their side, and even rebooting the universe if the situation is dire enough is not out of the question for them. So chaos can't even really pass through here. We're talking about a guy who could out-trick Tzeentch, a mind that can pass up the Emperor of Mankind, and all of that in a box that can go anywhere at any time, and make it so that time doesn't even carry out as it always had. You know that Dalek reality bomb that just sort of ends everything? We can see Donna Noble, one of the Doctor's companions, who ends up getting the Doctor's intelligence, defuse it in a matter of seconds. This is the guy who, on a whim in the 11th hour, made a living computer virus to take over every computer clock on Earth in a matter of minutes. Maybe a little low on the end of things we've talked about so far, but imagine that kind of virus with a dark streak being set across Mars or any Necron tomb world. This is a guy who fakes his way into a series of history books just to get someone's attention. He has all of time and space at his fingertips, even if he didn't want to confront the 40k universe, even if they knew he existed. What can the Emperor of Mankind do against a dude just chilling out a few galaxies over? Not very much. The dude can speak dinosaur, whatever that means. Half his foes, aliens from other dimensions, turn and run hearing his names. Not to give the British a win, but the Doctor is just so overpowered by plot shenanigans, it comes all the way around to being kind of cool again. But that being said, unless the plot is really, really against him, there is no way for the Doctor to lose, because we need to make at least one more season and drag this 60-something-year-old show into the 41st millennium.
Point a gun at me if it helps you relax.
We're only human.
But with that, our little foray into throwing some of Britain's top sci-fi space opera icons at one another comes to an end. Honestly, I was a little bit surprised going into this. Doctor Who tends to feel small with its intimate episodes that only really cover a handful of people in any adventure at a time. But starting to delve into the deeper bits of lore, especially around the Time War and the Time Lords in depth, it really surprised me. In a lot of ways, it reminded me of Ben 10 when I learned just how insane the Omnitrix could be in the face of Warhammer 40k's admittedly equal stupidness, but on a smaller level. Today, we're doing more of the same, taking a few famous aliens that are really just dangerous on a single planet, looking at how they'd act if plopped into the grimdark future. Then, also looking at some of the Doctor's galactic-spanning evil empires and comparing their dangerous qualities to the many, many armies of 40k. As always, if you like this and want even more, leave a comment down below or subscribe to the channel so you're not missing out on any future videos. But without further ado, let's get into the wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. The Carnivorous Shadows, Vashta Nerada.
Vashta Nerada.
Can we get it one more time, David?
The Vashta Nerada.
Yes, the microscopic alien spores that devour beings whole, found by the droves like a parasite onto every planet in the universe, including Earth. They are indestructible according to the Doctor, otherwise known as the smartest person in the universe. Not fire, not the void of space. When you encounter them, you're better off running as fast as you can. Think of tardigrades, the microscopic water bears. Did you know these little fat idiots are basically immune to everything? You can't burn them, you can't drown them, you can't kill them in a vacuum, and they effectively live forever. Think of that, but super smart, in a flying swarm and able to rip the flesh off your bones in a matter of seconds. Unless you're in a perfectly nanotight suit of armor, there's no escaping them. Your suit can be airtight, it can be watertight, and vacuum sealed. It doesn't matter with microscopic beings, though. Now, the thankful thing is that they are rarely aggressive or even capable of killing you. In small numbers, they're incredibly harmless, literal dust. The only reason they were so dangerous in that one episode of Doctor Who is because there was a planet-sized library that used all the natural trees where the Nerada live in order to bind their books. So, unless there's any galaxy-wide regimes in 40k that take all the natural resources of a world and completely grind them down to use in every inch of their infrastructure, they've got nothing to worry about. Oh yeah. Shit. I guess the industries of 40k might be fucked. The Tau's Earthcast, the Tyranids gobbling down all life, the Votan swallowing worlds, the Imperium's hundreds of millions of hive cities. Yeah, Vashta Nerada would become a common pest in the 40k universe. Stripped from their trees and following every race that harvested their homes, the Vashta Nerada, like a serial killer shadow just waiting for you to walk into the dark. The lone factory workers on their way home from work, the Tau being eaten alive in their battle suits, entire Titan crews devoured from within the cabin, entire battle barges of Astartes all devoured in their sleep, an empty ship arriving to join the fight, suits of empty power armor, their owners cleaned out, piloted around by the Vashta Nerada themselves. The only proper way the Imperium or any other faction could handle this is like how they handle the mass plagues of Nurgle. Nuke the planet and move on. Quarantine entire sectors and blow apart any void ship that may even be a little bit infected by these swarms. Otherwise, they'll be picked off one by one. Speaking of Nurgle, with the unstoppable hunger and devouring nature of the Vashta Nerada, there's a non-zero chance that by pure fury of stomach, they may become tainted by the warp within 40k, able to sprout up in a devastating swarm of bubonic carnivores in almost every corner across the galaxy. No way out, no way around. You have to exterminatus entire worlds before it gets too bad, and even then, never return. Otherwise, when someone comes to collect tithes, they'll be showing up to a silent world. Now, this one is interesting because we have a creature befitting the sorcerers of Tzeentch, and in the purpose of telling a good mystery, we don't really know how it works. The Midnight Entity, named simply for the diamond-crusted planet it was discovered on, is a strange, powerful, and seemingly unkillable creature of unknown origins. We know it's incredibly durable and strong, able to rip apart a craft made of heavy steel with ease. It can survive on a planet made of diamonds without eating or drinking for millennia. It doesn't have the need to, all while getting blasted by the unfiltered extonic rays of a galvanized star. Said to be so powerful that no life, not even microscopic life, could survive, but yet the entity lived on the surface for an unknowable number of years. As we see later, the Doctor returns to Midnight over 400,000 years in the future, and it's still around, still latching onto hosts and looking for a way off the planet. Now yes, that immobility does make the Midnight Entity weak to some regard. If it holds onto a host and you understand how it works, you could just shove them in a box, but that only lasts as long as the host does. Someone like Trazen could trap its host in a tesseract forever, or an Imperial agent could drop it and the poor guardsman it locked onto some backwater planet. But that's if they find out, and if it hasn't been able to jump from host to host, learning from each creature it latches onto, slowly becoming more human as it goes. Able to latch on and control the mind of even the Doctor, there is no being in 40k that it couldn't latch onto and take advantage of. Although perhaps the mechanical minds of the Necrons could be immune. We just don't know how it would work in the presence of artificial life forms, or even magical ones in the case of demons. Then also, there's no telling how it would interact with the warp. If it would become even stronger and mobile as a demon of Tzeentch, if it's even considered alive enough to be corrupted, or if it's something else entirely. In truth, while there's ways to avoid the Midnight Entity, that's all you can do. God forbid what might happen if it hopped from host to host all the way to the Golden Throne, but I'm curious what your theories might be, so just let me know down below, because this one's really just an open book. And now, the wildest card. The Master, a rogue Time Lord, a cosmic hobo, a chaos agent with a PhD in cleverness and many contrived moral gray areas. Equal parts Messiah and madman, the Master always finds a way to crawl back from damnation, no matter the odds. In the 40k universe, they're less of a villain and more of a general cataclysm. Now, with a TARDIS, catching the Master in a corner is next to impossible. They have to basically choose how to engage you in any conflict, and you can't just nuke the spaceship, because, well, we've seen other TARDISes take multiversal explosions and sort of not care. Of course, the pen is the worst enemy of the Master. They only really lose because the script says they have to. Even old writers for the show admit that the Master would come out on top if the Doctor wasn't destined to win. But, for the most part, the Master follows the same logic of warfare that the Time Lords do. They're just on their own set of rules beyond that. The Master doesn't have to square up and duke it out with you. If they really wanted to, they could go back in time and make it so you never existed. Now, stopping for a moment. If you've watched the first part of this mini-series, you'll know that everything I just said is a near-to-one description of how I introduced the Doctor last time. Because that's kind of what the Master is. The Doctor, but evil. I mean, that's part of what makes them so interesting. But while similar to the Doctor being childhood best friends and of equal convoluted importance to the script, there's a few solid differences between the two. First is the Master's version of plot armor. While the Doctor always wins any confrontation because they're on the tin, the Master, equally as absurd, just finds a way to return. Whether being executed by a previous version of themselves, atomized, or even cremated, the Master just seems to return at a random point in the future. They'd pull up on Terra, get shot, and then a few thousand years later you discover that the Master is the one leading the Tau. That, and an extra bit of unknowable endlessness, is kind of what makes them so unpredictable. Then, the second thing is that if they have access to a TARDIS and a screwdriver and all the other Whovian contrivance equipment, the Master is much like the Doctor, but where the Doctor would see the Warhammer 40k galaxy and try to fix it, if not straight out reset it to a more kind place, the Master would try, or want, to control it. They'd go back in time to be a part of the Emperor's inner circle, offering Gallifreyan tech to the Imperium. They'd go further back and become an ally of the Necrons. They'd show up and make the Votans' Ironkin as advanced as the Cybermen. They'd weave their fingers into each and every strand across 40k's history, and even help these empires grow beyond the Milky Way so their own empire could go even further. Without the Doctor to get in the way, the Master nearly took over Earth using metahumans from the far future, and he'd just do exactly that all over 40k. The only thing that would have a chance of standing in their way is chaos, but with how the Master operates by themselves, with access to endless technology and all of time and space, they'd likely just join the ranks of the Great Game, the true Dark King of 40k, empowering and dominating the forces of chaos for their own design, if not getting unwittingly wrapped up in their plots all the same. So essentially, think the Doctor all over again, but this time they're not afraid to just shoot you point blank with a supernova if you happen to be in the way. Now, if you look at these guys and are immediately reminded of Firstborn Marines or the Votan, you're not far off. Take your general Space Marine or Votan fighter in power armor, and then combine them with the abundant joy of fighting that the Orcs have. And if in the universe of 40k, you're basically looking at another force of Orcs. The Sontarans are clones. All of them. Short, stocky little potato people with advanced weapons, a love for straight combat over tactical strikes, and the capability to create 1 million soldiers in 4 minutes. Now, that's incredible, because you have a fighting force somewhere between Votan and Orc in terms of tech and raw fighting power, but reproducing at the rate of Tyranids, if not faster. If left to linger, they could produce a culture of 1,440,000,000 in a 24-hour period. Now, that's insane, even by 40k standards. Yes, hive worlds can have populations into the trillions, and even entire guard regiments are made of billions of soldiers, but that takes time. It took humanity roughly 30,000 years to get to where they are, and they've somewhat stagnated since then. The Sontarans are putting up 1.5 billion soldiers each day. And like many races in Doctor Who, access to FTL travel would mean their fleets could hide out, build an unfathomable amount of numbers, and descend on a hive world in less time it would take for any planetary governor to send out a signal for Astartes reinforcements. Could they get beaten out by an efficiently sized Astartes force? Sure, but they have the logistical advantage in spades. Even if they are overpowered by Astartes or even greater forces like the Custodes 10,000 to 1, it's hard to fight with a foe who raises 1 billion well-armed soldiers in a day. In a multitude of sources, a small band of Custodes could take on anywhere between 1 million Tyranids and a few dozen Marines, depending on the circumstance, who the protagonist is, etc. But even still, a billion of any force descending on a squad of custodies would wipe them out, even if the Emperor's Guard managed to kill a few million before they went down. Just the sheer dogpile would be enough to crush any foe in the 40K galaxy. And that's before taking into consideration the crazier deep cuts like star killer weaponry that the Sontarans have. And while they aren't as absolutely domineering as the Cybermen or Daleks on a galactic scale, they'd fit right in with Warhammer 40K, kind of like a strange mishmash of orcs, Tau, and Votann all at once that any faction aside from orcs, Tyranids, and Chaos would struggle against. Oh yeah, they'd probably also see a lot of those billions of soldiers fall to chaos. A sense of duty and honor in combat is a core to their culture, right up Khorne's driveway. The whole idea of, I'm gonna punch you hard in the face rather than stabbing you in the back, is one of the main pillars of Sontaran warfare that would likely see them becoming Khornate, if not creating their own chaos gods like Gork and Mork, the prime Sontar, seeing their thumb-like soldiers wage war on a galactic scale. In the universe of Doctor Who, the Sontarans are big fish in an ocean of wacky sci-fi bullshit. In 40K, they become a very big fish in a half-decent sized pond. Still a lot of craziness, but they're still able to defend themselves from a lot of the other big players. Likely not to the extent they'd ever conquer the galaxy, I just don't think they're smart enough for that. They'd be more likely to fall into a grand heresy, but they'd very quickly become a big player alongside the Imperium, Tyranids, and Chaos, probably pushing a lot of the smaller Xenos factions out of the food chain. Now, this goofy villain of Doctor Who is the strongest I've spoken about yet. A being from before the chaos of the Time Lords, an entity from a different dimension who was able to materialize into reality once it was stabilized by thoughts and rules. Sound familiar? A creature of unknowable origins, of unknowable ages that controls the very ground it walks on just for a good laugh and to fuck around with you. Sound even more familiar? It's Tzeentch. It's just Tzeentch. The toy maker is just Tzeentch if he was able to manifest into reality. Like, just look at this. You can't kill the guy, or your bullets are getting changed and warped into set decorations. You can't approach him, or you're joining a ball pit. The only way to technically beat him is to challenge the toy maker to a game within his own separate universe, and then beat him at that game, which temporarily would give you all his powers. In Doctor Who, it took 2 doctors to pull this off. For anyone else, good luck. Now, the good thing is that he's confined to the rules of the game. So if you challenge him to a 1v1 in COD, he can't just install an aimbot, unless you do it first, because if his opponents cheat, it just becomes a new rule to the game that he will take full advantage of. So we have this eldritch game master who existed in time before time, has done nothing but engross himself in games and puzzles, and is able to best pretty much anybody in the universe at whichever game he plays. Now, the good thing here for 40K is that he doesn't want to conquer or exterminate all of life. Not exactly. Otherwise, he could do so very easily. His goal is to turn everyone and everything into his own personal playthings by besting them in games of wits. Now, for your average Imperial citizen who can barely read and write, he's sweeping Y. Even most Astartes would fall to him, if not all of them. His biggest issue will be the characters in 40K that are the smartest, the kind of creatures who can plot and plan devoid of the regular flow of time. A few Eldar maybe, Necrons perhaps, or even the Chaos Gods themselves. But anyone who works under the standard laws of time would be fallible to lose his game, even the Emperor of Mankind, at least before the chair. He was smart, but foresight was explicitly one of his weak points. And even then, the toy maker has one glaring leg up on Chaos. He exists. No warp realm, no demonic anchor. He's here, and he can leave whenever he wants. He can play and dance all day long, and the Chaos Gods can never touch him. A being able to move across all of space and time at the snap of his fingers, opening separate dimensions and even singing a live studio performance of the Spice Girls to an audience that he torments. Even if he granted an audience to Tzeentch and the two played the most convoluted game of multi-dimensional chess to ever exist, the game itself would last forever. And even then, if he was trapped and locked away like he was after encountering the Doctor, he'd take millions upon millions of years to degrade enough to even be considered something approaching dead. Humanity would burn out and all the stars in the Milky Way would turn to dust before he even began to decay. So either way, the Toymaker would at the very least outlive all of the life in 40k. And for today, my dear viewers, is all of our matchups. And even the Toymaker himself speaks of a being to be scared of, so there's definitely more out there in the Doctor Who universe to come back to. Now, again, like the last two, we're not going to be delving into the framework too much and come at this with the understanding that you might have some past knowledge of Warhammer and Doctor Who, but go check out the first video in this miniseries if you'd like more context around these entries. But before we dive into some new aliens, I wanted to look at some of the biggest comments I've seen repeated on both of the previous videos. The first being, wouldn't the Imperium just have servitors to keep an eye on weeping angels? Now yes, almost every automated door in the Imperium is powered by a living servitor, which would be enough to set off the quantum protection of the angels. But the important thing to mention here is that angels can often affect the electrical currents around them to mess with lights and force people to take their eyes off them. And servitors attached to doors aren't that complex. Not to mention the added bonus that if an unfortunate servitor catches eye contact with the statue, the servitor itself will turn into another angel. They still wouldn't be wiping entire Imperial worlds off the map, not that they'd want to, but unfortunately servitors aren't the most adept response to this problem. Although there's nothing stopping the Imperium from forging a specific type of servitor to solve this problem alone. And at the same time, some galactic governors could argue that angels are better for their worlds in the long run. Even more so if the angels who are intelligent can take advantage of this fact, as I spoke about in that first video. The second kind of comment I see a lot is the many mentions of the Ordo Chronos of Warhammer 40k, a small branch of the Inquisition intent on discovering and dealing with chronological time anomalies within and around the Imperium. Now, this is a great example of 40k using one or two lines for flavor, and the community expanding that into places unseen. I've seen everything about them in my comments, from they removed themselves from the timeline when not in service, so chaos cannot corrupt them and access their time travel tech, or that their operations are paradoxes in of themselves, and that's what removes their existence, to the claims that the Ordo Chronos would easily just deal with threats like the Weeping Angels, Daleks, and even the Doctor, because time travel wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. Now, not only is there a lack of any substantive source to back this all up, besides popular fan theories or headcanons, in all my research I couldn't find a singular primary source that says they remove themselves or have time travel tech so advanced that Chaos or Necrons couldn't get a hold of it for fear of something greater. Like a lot of obscure Warhammer lore, the Ordo Chronos is an interesting idea that has no concrete answers, so a lot of the sources simply state possibilities. Maybe they did this, maybe they vanished, maybe they were in hiding, but there's no proof or substantive detail for this, just a footnote taken too literally by eager fans. So while I'm sure the Ordo Chronos we do know about would be taking records of Weeping Angels and other Whovian time travel, there's nothing I could find that says they'd have the powers to actually do something with these factions. Like, not to spit some heresy, but if the Imperium had some time travel tech on the level of Doctor Who, why wouldn't they mount a mission to warn the Emperor of Horus's betrayal, besides the latent irrationality that plagues the Imperium on a regular basis? Again, I'm going to have to chalk up most of the Ordo Chronos to the fate they found in many of GW's own work, a footnote that sounds interesting, but is not explicitly given to us in any form that would indicate substantive argument for my purposes here. Simply see your nearby administrative officiant if you still have concerns with the Chronos' operation. And if you have anything to say to the contrary, please link your sources and stuff down below in the comments. I love learning about this kind of stuff, and just in my own research, I couldn't find anything that supported the kind of comments and stuff I've seen on the previous videos, so that's kind of just where we are. Now, back on topic. We've already looked at the standout aliens of Doctor Who, from Daleks and Cybermen to the Doctor themselves, and today we're mixing it up by inspecting a few of the show's nicher, but still staggering monsters. Without further ado, let's just get right into it. In Warhammer 40k, Mars is no longer red. It's black with ash and fire. Home to the Adeptus Mechanicus in their sprawling forges, this dead world breathes smog and bleeds steel. Beneath its toxic skies, titans are built and wars are born. But deep beneath the surface, one could expect to find the Ice Warriors, also known as the Native Martians, cold-blooded lizard humanoids who wore armor that was grown in chambers cybernetically enhanced and then merged with the wearers, turning these natives into proper cyborgs, one with their armor not so different from the black carapace of a space marine. But as soldiers of the cold who use sonic weaponry that folds targets in on themselves and cryogenic guns that freeze people where they stand, the greatest weakness of the Ice Warriors is a quick and extreme change in temperature which can overwhelm their battle suits, leaving them unprotected. If they wake up on the 40k version of Mars, choked under tons of gas in what's essentially a garage with the car running inside, any exposure to Mars's modern surface would quickly put the Ice Warriors on the back foot. But while the creations of Gandor are native to Sol and its third planet, they are still far from human. At best, their discovery on Mars would see a Mechanicus Magi working with them to try and learn about this technology from before humanity's beginning, possibly seeing it as some divine artifact. At worst, they would be hunted to extinction. While powerful individually, their frailty to heat would put them at immediate odds against the Imperium, who love their Melta, Flama, and other extreme weapons that would torch the Ice Warriors. To the Mechanicus, they are ancient data in walking form, either a resource to dissect or a threat to purge. And in a galaxy that reveres fire, the Ice Warriors' cold hearts wouldn't last long. Now, as to the strength of the Ice Warriors at the height of their golden age, I'm going to leave that all to you. Let me know how you think that would handle down in the comments below. After the Ice Warriors are truly and finally extinct, the Mechanicus would not yet be done, as the first and primary cause for their end would rear its ugly head immediately after. Simply named the Flood, a parasitic and microscopic entity that lives in and is practically the water of Mars itself. Now, any water left on Mars would be long gone in 40k. But any ice buried deep in the planet or along the poles may still contain its toxic insides, as it only takes a single drop of water for the Flood to infect a living being. And while most of the Mechanicus are fitted with multitudes of technic parts, they're still human. In fact, all the computers of the Imperium are, as their anti-AI ban means that every servitor, every servo skull, or other machine, no matter how infused with metal it is, still contains a human brain made of 80% water. Now, the true danger of the Flood is how fast they spread and how long they go without being detected. While there's a few key signs, such as cracked skin around the mouth, white eyes, and the expulsion of water from all pores on an infected creature, we also see when they were encountered by the Doctor, the Flood were able to suppress a few of these features to better allow infected hosts to infiltrate the Mars base in Doctor Who. If some poor servitor first comes into contact with the flood, thawed beneath the surface of Mars, and it spreads drop by drop, not between 9 crew members, but between an entire Forge world where millions upon trillions of Magi, servitors, and Skitarii are, the flood could very quickly grow out of proportion, especially if they are able to infuse with any other large bodies of liquid. Once they get bad enough, the only way to stop them would be to deploy Exterminatus across the surface of the red planet, cleansing all life so that the flood don't have a chance to escape. But if they can find their way out, if they capture a single Thunderhawk or another naval vessel and ended up hitching a ride to Terra, if not another number of planets across the galaxy, they could truly uproot the Imperium with a plague that Nurgle could only ever dream of. Because how do you fight water? You can hit it with enough heat to dry it all away, but if a single drop lands in an ocean, on a planet you intend to live within, that whole world needs to go into the bin. With the flood, it is all or nothing. Either you stop them, or you're screwed. Now, this wispy organization of space laws referenced by the Doctor themselves on several occasions seems like they would be a great fit for Warhammer 40k. The Shadow Proclamation, space police of the Whoverse, who somewhat stepped up to fill the power vacuum left by the destruction of the Time Lords. The Shadow Proclamation is very cool in theory, but everything I've found on them doesn't really do them justice from how they're described. On the upside, they are a universal body, not retained to a single galaxy like any of the 40k factions, meaning that their ability to travel with FTL starships and a nearly infinite number of mercenary armies to recruit to their cause, along with armies they may recruit within the Milky Way from rogue traders to renegade space marines, the greatest strength of the Shadow Proclamation is not overwhelming numbers, nor time travel doohickeys, but organizational and bureaucratic superiority. Imagine the Tau, but with the operating size and extreme power of the Imperium, but even larger because they cover the entire universe, not just a single galaxy. Operating across the galaxy, but only really interfering in cases of extreme importance, such as multiversal prisoners or stolen planets, they aren't coming in to make sure every single hive city is up to their standards, but rather becoming a thorn in the side of any cosmic miscreants, such as the Chaos Gods or Trazyn. They would become kind of like the ideological opposite of the Inquisitors. On paper, incredibly powerful. In practice, they can only get so much done as long as it's in their purview, but they are not as powerful as the Time Lords, nor as omniscient as Chaos. Although with how problematic and destructive the Warhammer 40k universe is, how they treat war crimes as checklists and how common atrocities are, the Space Police might just go out of their way to build one of the many dozens of galaxy busters from the Whoverse and try nuking all the Milky Way for everyone else's sake. Darkness from before time. A great evil which cannot be killed. A monster so grand it was chained just inches away from the event horizon of a supermassive black hole, aboard a planet that was sent to fall into the dark cosmic well if it were ever to break free. Call it what you will. Satan, Lucifer, the devil, the beast, the origin behind the myth that had embedded itself into the back of the minds of all life across the cosmos. In Doctor Who, the beast is a strange entity that was thrown into the black hole prison by the Doctor themselves. In 40k, you have Khorne incarnate. We don't know what the beast truly is. It's described as a demon. It has existed by claim since before time, before the Time Lords. It was chained up by a civilization that came before Gallifrey. It has affected every civilization to the point that societies across the universe have tales of dark lords and great horned demons. It can take the minds of lesser beings and even command great hive minds with its powers of control and manipulation. Now really, this can go one of two ways. The Beast either joins the Chaos Pantheon, basically becoming a Chaos God that competes for the same evil throne of Khorne, with a huge leg up on the Blood God, able to move throughout real space and directly influence countless worlds while taking the minds of plenty, as very few in 40k could muster the powers to throw the Beast into a black hole, and even then, there's no guarantee that such a thing would kill it. Or, the Beast could just branch the gap between Chaos and the Tyranids. As we see from its short appearance on Doctor Who, the Beast could capture the entire Ood mind from under its grasp. If it happened to place the ravenous Tyranid hive mind under one control and set them on a path of true malevolence, while Genestealer cults, new Chaos warbands, and more gathered all together, the Beast, the Devil, now in 40k, would wage a war so grand and existential to the universe of 40k that it would make the war in heaven appear as child's play. And I wish there was more to go on, but unlike the toy maker, we just don't get that many ideas as to what the Beast is capable of, or what its power would be if it were unchained. Although presumably very, very bad, as the species that chained it up on that planet in the first place was even more powerful than the Necrons during the Age of the War in Heaven. So I don't know who in 40k would necessarily be able to handle that outside of Chaos. And I feel like that might be it. We've covered Daleks, Cybermen, the Toymaker,
The Vashta Narada.
and literally Satan. Really, what else is there to talk about in Doctor Who? It's not like there's another entity right in front of our face that's also alive, right? Oh shit, yeah, that's right. Time and relative dimensions in space. TARDIS, or more explicitly for today, the Doctor's TARDIS, is very much a living thing with a mind of its own. Literally. And you thought the dual-sun powered phone box that was bigger on the inside couldn't get weirder. A ship so complex that they needed to be grown in a null void outside the laws of traditional space and reality in order to exist. Basically a man-made warp. A vessel that was movement rather than moving as it often appears to do. Try and wrap your head around that one. Sentient enough that TARDIS machines would kill themselves if their pilot died. The Doctor once revealed that there's something akin to an elephant grave at the end of time dedicated to just bygone TARDISes. Among that makes it an impossible ship to board. If anyone other than the pilot and their companions tried to take off, the TARDIS would simply assault their minds. And if need be, each time ship came equipped with a spare dimension. Because why not? Think of the Doctor's own personal mini-warp just kept in some random closet aboard the TARDIS. Another little phantom zone. Of course. Now, with the Doctor in tow, the TARDIS is an immense tool and a weapon all in one. This was a spaceship made for war, or at least used in the Time War. It can be used to destroy all of reality in a singular Big Bang, or bring peace and hope to anyone that the Doctor visited, ringing out joy with the whir of those classic breaks. On its own, the TARDIS may simply sit on some far-off world in 40k, waiting around. The TARDIS is much like riding a horse as opposed to driving a mechanical car. You can guide it just as much as it guides you, but without a rider trying to lead the horse along, it simply does as it would anyways, galloping through fields, eating grass, and maybe killing a Boeing engineer or two. Well, it's such a stupid reference. Without the Doctor or any other pilot, I don't think the TARDIS is primed to do anything. It may simply just concede itself to that graveyard at the end of time. All the same, I don't believe it can have a machine spirit conquered by chaos, seeing that the TARDIS cannot be wrangled and could simply move itself to a point in time across the universe where all life has been dead for eons, chaos devoured by the stars right behind them. But I did want to briefly inspect and reveal just how crazy the TARDIS is herself, since we did not analyze what she was capable of in the Doctor's own episode. Let me know what you think down below, and if there's any characters in 40k you think would be a good fit and the TARDIS would allow to pilot it throughout all of time and space within 40k. I think a small band of orcs stumbling upon a TARDIS loading themselves in, being accepted, and kind of going wherever they feel like, would make for an excellent TV show. And for today, my dear viewers, that is all of our matchups. There's definitely more out there in the Doctor Who universe to come back to, so let me know down below if you'd be interested in a 4th episode of whatever this is. But that'll be it for us today. As always, a wonderful thank you to the glorious patrons and members who support the channel. If you'd like to be among them, you can join for just $1 a month and get videos early, some behind the scenes, and even ask questions in the videos themselves. With that, stay cool, have fun, and be awesome. Buster out.